I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
Prince Harry had endured silence, rejection, and years of distance. But he had never believed every path back could be destroyed in a single morning. Then King Charles placed his signature beneath a private royal order designed to make reconciliation possible, but restoration impossible. When the sealed decision reached Harry, he read the first page twice, gripped the edge of the table, and realized his father had not merely closed one door. He had sealed the entire corridor. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew the room had become too quiet. Inside his private study at Windsor Castle, the king faced a folder as Prince William and the private secretary waited. The Royal Restoration Closure Order was a binding palace directive, meaning it set the limits of Harry's future role and told the royal household how to enforce them. It ended every route back to working royal life: military appointments, official representation, palace-backed security, a formal residence, and any part-time position within the monarchy. Charles reached for the pen, then stopped. His hand remained above the signature line long enough for William to notice, and the future king watched his father struggle between private love and duty. A return without boundaries could blur who spoke for the crown, while another compromise could drag the family back into the same cycle of pressure and public conflict. Yet the name on the page was still his son's. Harry received the secured copy in California through his legal representative. Meghan stood nearby as confusion left his face and disbelief took its place. He read the clause, stating that no private family agreement could overturn the order, then looked up in disbelief. The document did not remove him from the family or deny his blood connection to Charles. It did something colder. It separated being the king's son from ever again serving the crown. Charles added one final handwritten instruction: no palace official, future private secretary, household committee, or royal intermediary could reopen restoration talks unless the sovereign and direct heir agreed together. The sovereign meant the reigning monarch, while the direct heir was next in line to inherit the throne. That condition made William essential to any reversal. Charles finished signing, placed the pen beside the folder, and said quietly, "No more uncertainty." William gave no answer. He closed the cover over Harry's name, and the younger brother's last hope disappeared. Harry's shock was immediate, but the deeper wound came from discovering that his father had not acted alone, and that William's role was far more personal than the document revealed. Behind the royal language, legal clauses, and sealed instructions stood two brothers who had once walked behind the same coffin and promised never to abandon one another. Now William was protecting the institution Harry believed had failed him, while Harry was fighting for a place William believed could no longer exist. Charles stood between them, not simply as king, but as a father forced to decide which bond could survive without endangering the crown. Harry did not see restoration as a return to ceremonies, uniforms, or palace balconies. He saw it as proof that leaving Britain had not erased his place in public life. He wanted purpose, recognition, and some path back to service. A working royal was a family member who carried out official duties on behalf of the monarch, and losing that role had left him feeling separated from both country and identity. William saw the same question through a colder lens. As heir, the person next in line to the throne, he believed a partial return would create two versions of Harry at once: a private man speaking freely, and a royal figure whose words could still be mistaken for the crown's position. Every appearance could trigger another argument. Every interview could reopen old wounds. Stability demanded a clear line, even if drawing it meant hurting his brother. Harry stared at the final page, while Meghan stood beside the kitchen table. Her hand moved toward his, but he pulled away, not from anger, but because his eyes were fixed on William's approval mark. Palace resistance had been expected. His brother's support had not. The future king had helped shape language designed to survive beyond Charles's reign, and that betrayal cut deeper than the loss of any title. Meghan watched him reread one sentence: "Family reconciliation shall not create constitutional expectation." Constitutional expectation meant the belief that a private family reunion could lead to an official royal role. To Harry, the words made affection feel weak and conditional. His father might welcome him as a son, yet the monarchy would still reject him as a prince with purpose. Charles carried the guilt in silence. The king remembered the frightened boy, who had once needed protection, but he could not ignore the adult years of public accusations, damaged trust, and private talks that became fresh disputes. He loved both sons, yet every attempt to hold them together seemed to pull the crown further apart. Catherine confronted William privately that evening. She asked whether permanence was truly necessary. He answered that uncertainty had already harmed everyone, but his controlled voice betrayed the cost. Later, the prince paused alone outside his children's rooms, knowing that protecting George's future may have ended Harry's royal one. Harry then began searching through old messages. Buried among them was a private promise Charles had made during an earlier family crisis, a promise that seemed to clash directly with the new order. Yet the decision had not begun with advisors or William's fears. It began with one explosive incident that convinced Charles the restoration question had become too dangerous to leave unresolved. The final order appeared sudden, but its true beginning lay months earlier inside a private room at Balmoral. That evening, Harry was offered a narrow path toward family reconciliation, under strict confidentiality. By midnight, the meeting had collapsed. William had walked out, and Charles had been left staring at an empty chair. One sentence spoken during that confrontation convinced the king that every future offer could become another battlefield, and that uncertainty itself had become a threat to the monarchy. Charles had authorized the talks in secret, because he still believed the family could be repaired before the damage became permanent. Harry would attend selected private occasions without carrying out official duties, making speeches, or representing the crown. The arrangement was meant to rebuild personal trust first. A working royal was someone who performed formal duties for the monarch, and the proposal carefully avoided suggesting that family contact would restore that position. Harry entered the Balmoral library meeting expecting more. The fictional gathering had been arranged with no cameras, no public statement, and no commercial use of anything discussed. Charles believed those limits would protect everyone. William believed they were the only reason the meeting could happen at all. Yet the younger brother soon demanded written confirmation that successful reconciliation would eventually lead to a Commonwealth role and restored ceremonial military status. William refused immediately. A Commonwealth role meant officially representing the monarch across a voluntary association of nations, while ceremonial military status carried symbolic links to regiments without active command. The prince said family contact could not be traded for constitutional rewards. Harry heard punishment in those words. He accused his brother of using the monarchy's future to control his own, and the future king pushed his chair backward with a sharp scrape. Harry turned toward Charles before the room could settle. "If you leave my future to William, you have already chosen." The king recoiled. He heard more than anger. He heard a warning that every private act of affection might become pressure for an official concession. Charles tried to calm both sons, but William walked out, and Harry followed moments later, without touching the tea placed before him. Morning brought the final blow. An overseas entertainment report published details closely resembling the private proposal, including the limits on appearances and the possibility of future talks. The source was never publicly identified, but a documented palace account recorded how quickly confidence collapsed. Harry later insisted through a recorded conversation with his legal representative that he had not authorized the leak. Inside the household, however, the damage had already been done. Charles remained alone in the library after both sons had gone. He lifted Harry's untouched cup, felt that it had gone cold, and quietly ordered an aide to cancel the next morning's family breakfast. Then he instructed advisors to examine whether reconciliation could be separated permanently from restoration. Their answer became the foundation of the order. Balmoral destroyed the last fragile experiment in trust. But the real emotional explosion came when Harry demanded to hear the verdict directly from the father who had signed it. Harry refused to let a sealed document become his father's final word. Within hours, he demanded a private call with no lawyers, no courtiers, and no carefully prepared statements. Charles agreed, but only after insisting that William would not join them. What followed was not a constitutional discussion. It was a collision between a son who believed he was being erased and a father who believed love could no longer be allowed to overrule consequence. Harry contacted the king through a protected family channel and rejected the private secretary's offer of a written explanation. A private secretary is the senior aide who manages the monarch's official business and sensitive communication. The younger prince refused another carefully worded palace message. He wanted Charles, not the institution. He wanted a father's answer, spoken without advisors shaping every sentence. Charles took the call inside a small sitting room at Windsor and dismissed every aide. He removed his glasses, placed the order beside him, and waited through several heavy seconds before Harry finally spoke. The silence mattered because neither man could hide behind ceremony now. One wanted recognition. The other believed repeated compromise would only deepen the damage. Harry asked whether the king intended him to spend the rest of his life as a prince without a country. Charles answered that his son had chosen an independent life, but the monarchy could not keep reorganizing itself around his changing relationship with it. The crown, meaning the monarch's official authority and duties, required clear boundaries. Without them, every reunion could become another demand for status. Harry's anger sharpened. He accused his father of giving William control over whether he could ever return. Charles corrected him at once. The future king had advised the crown, but the signature belonged to the monarch. So did the responsibility. Then the king disclosed something Harry had never expected to hear. Palace officials had documented 7 separate attempts by his representatives to connect private reconciliation with security, residence, ceremonial participation, or official status. Harry denied that those conversations were demands. He said advisors had twisted exploratory discussions into evidence against him. Charles reached for a confidential communication and read one sentence aloud from the documented account. Harry's team had described renewed family access as the first stage of institutional re-entry. Institutional re-entry meant using private contact as a path back into official royal life. Harry rose so quickly that his chair crashed backward. Charles heard the impact across the distance but did not move. "Do you still want me as your son?" the younger man demanded. The king closed his eyes. That was never the question. Charles then delivered the final blow. The order protected not only William's reign, but George's future. When the call ended, Camilla entered and found him gripping the arm of his chair. The queen consort heard him insist the decision was necessary, but his voice broke on the word. The confrontation exposed the family wound, yet the force making the order permanent came from a colder calculation. One centered on William, George, and the survival of undivided royal authority. Charles carried the emotional burden, but William held the argument that made reversal almost impossible. For the heir, Harry's return was not merely a family matter. It threatened to create 2 competing royal centers, one inside the monarchy and one operating beyond its control. Yet when William was finally asked to approve the permanent clause, he did not sign immediately. He walked to the window, looked across Windsor, and faced the cost of making his brother's exile irreversible. William had received the same warning from several advisors. A part-time arrangement would blur responsibility, because every speech, interview, charity campaign, or commercial project involving Harry might be mistaken for royal approval. The heir was the person next in line to the throne, and that position forced him to think beyond one reunion. He had to consider how confusion now could weaken authority later. The prince feared precedent even more. Precedent meant an earlier decision that future royals might use as a model. If one senior family member could leave, attack the institution, and later negotiate a custom return, every future sovereign could face the same pressure. William believed the crown would lose control slowly, not through one dramatic collapse, but through years of exceptions. Catherine challenged him in private. She asked whether stability truly required absolute finality, then reminded him that grief had shaped both brothers in different ways. Harry had carried anger outward. William had buried pain beneath duty. The princess warned that a permanent order might harden that pain into identity, leaving one brother trapped as protector and the other trapped as exile. William did not dismiss her. He admitted that Harry remained the only person who fully understood parts of their childhood no one else could reach. Yet memory could not outweigh the responsibility he owed George, Charlotte, and Louis. Their future depended on a monarchy that spoke with one voice, not a family arrangement constantly reopened by private pressure. William then revealed the strongest clause through a documented constitutional briefing. No future restoration could be granted by the reigning monarch alone. The sovereign and direct heir would have to agree together, meaning both the ruler and the next person in line must approve any reversal. That condition made the order difficult to undo, even after Charles's reign. George's name appeared inside a private succession impact assessment. The report warned that unresolved conflict could follow the young prince into adulthood and force him to inherit a dispute he had never created. William read that passage twice before returning to the approval page. Catherine waited beside the fireplace as he signed. The future king paused, pressed his palm flat against the paper, and seemed to steady something already beyond repair. She watched him leave without touching the tea she had poured, knowing he had protected the crown while wounding the brother beneath the title. When Harry learned who had written the joint consent clause, his anger shifted toward William. The signature completed the machinery of exclusion, and its first humiliating consequences were already moving toward Harry. The order did not remain an abstract declaration sealed inside Windsor. By the next morning, its consequences had begun moving through royal offices with brutal efficiency. Invitations were revised. Residence discussions disappeared. Military requests were returned unanswered. Harry watched possibilities he had privately preserved for years vanish within hours. The most painful moment came when a familiar palace contact called, not to reopen negotiations, but to explain that he was no longer permitted to discuss Harry's royal future at all. The royal household circulated a restricted instruction before breakfast. The royal household meant the staff and offices that supported the monarch's official work, and this message ended every active conversation about Harry's return. Family travel could still be discussed. Private visits could still happen. But restoration, representation, funding, security, residences, and appointments were now closed subjects. The line had been drawn, and staff were ordered not to blur it. Harry felt the next loss almost immediately. A proposed arrangement allowing him to stay at a protected royal property during future family visits was withdrawn. That mattered because such a residence would have offered both security and a visible link to royal life. Without it, every visit would be private, temporary, and stripped of institutional meaning. Even entering Britain would now remind him that he belonged to the family, but not to its official world. An elderly former equerry called later that morning. An equerry was a trusted royal aide who often handled personal duties and sensitive communication for a senior family member. The man had once carried quiet messages between Harry and Charles, when direct contact felt impossible. Now he spoke slowly, apologized, and explained that the new instruction prevented him from discussing royal service again. Harry said little. After the call ended, he removed a framed photograph of himself in military uniform from a shelf. He did not smash it or throw it away. He placed it face down and stood motionless. Meghan found him there and heard him say that the order had taken more than a role. It had taken the last version of himself he still believed might be recovered. Meghan moved closer, but comfort could not reach the center of that loss. Harry's identity had been tied to duty, military service, country, and family long before his departure. Now each connection seemed to be closing at once, and she understood that reassurance would not repair what finality had broken. Harry's lawyers delivered another blow through a documented legal briefing. Palace-managed charities could no longer be used as a quieter route back into public royal work. A planned meeting with a senior Commonwealth representative was also cancelled because he had no mandate to explore a formal role. Harry's sadness hardened into resolve. He opened a private message to William and wrote only one sentence: "Speak to me without the crown in the room." With every official route sealed, he abandoned advisors and legal arguments, forcing the conflict toward the one conversation neither brother could hide behind any longer. For the first time since the order was signed, Harry and William spoke without Charles, lawyers, aides, or constitutional language between them. There were no uniforms, no palace rooms, and no witnesses to soften what followed. Harry wanted William to admit that the decision was personal. William wanted Harry to accept that consequence was not revenge. But beneath their anger lay the same unspoken truth. Both men were still fighting over wounds formed long before either understood what the crown would demand from them. Catherine persuaded William to answer the encrypted call as a brother rather than as heir. An encrypted call was a protected conversation designed to prevent outsiders from hearing or recording it. The prince entered his study alone, closed the door, and connected without an advisor beside him. Across the distance, Harry waited only a moment before asking the question that had consumed him. Harry demanded to know why future heirs had been included in the order. He believed the clause was designed to ensure that George could never restore what Charles had removed. William answered that the decision was not aimed at punishing one generation. Every temporary compromise had created another cycle of hope, pressure, publicity, and resentment. The future king wanted that cycle to end before his son inherited it. Harry heard abandonment, not protection. He said certainty meant something different when it came from strangers, but from family it felt like being buried alive, while everyone insisted the decision was merciful. William did not strike back. He admitted that the order was painful, but argued that royal service could not become a cure for identity once trust in the institution had already broken. Harry finally revealed the fear beneath his anger. He had wanted a role because he could not bear becoming irrelevant to the country that had shaped him. Without duty, ceremony, or official purpose, he feared Britain would remember him only for leaving. William answered that service had to begin with trust, not with the need to recover a lost version of oneself. William then confessed something through their recorded private conversation that Harry had never known. Charles had originally proposed a 5-year review clause, meaning the order could have been reconsidered after a fixed period. The prince opposed it. He demanded permanence because repeated reviews would keep both households trapped in the same battle. Harry answered with his own revelation. He insisted he had never authorized the Balmoral leak, and believed someone around his wider team had acted independently. William accepted that it might be true, but said the deeper wound came before the leak, the moment family contact had been tied to official demands. William spoke quietly before ending the call. "I am not asking you to disappear." Harry's reply came without hesitation. "You only made sure I can never come back." Silence held between them before the future king said goodbye. William remained alone in his study, while Harry stepped outside into the night. Neither had changed his position, but the younger brother made one final choice. He would stop seeking restoration and speak publicly only once. Their private battle had ended. Now the world would judge what remained. By sunrise, the decision was no longer confined to private rooms. Britain awoke to the image of two royal doors printed across a national newspaper. One open beneath William's name, the other sealed in black beneath Harry's. Broadcasters called it the most definitive royal separation in a generation. Outside Windsor Castle, a small crowd gathered beneath the grey morning sky, divided between those who saw necessary discipline and those who saw a father abandoning his son. The palace released a brief statement before the morning broadcasts reached their peak. It confirmed that every question concerning Harry's future official role had been conclusively settled, while insisting that private family relationships remained separate from constitutional duty. Constitutional duty meant the formal responsibilities carried out by the monarch and working members of the royal family. The message was short, but its meaning was brutal. Affection might survive, yet restoration would not. Royal commentators repeated the distinction throughout the morning. Harry would remain Charles's son, keep his family connection, and continue to carry his title. But no structured path remained for him to return as a working royal. Supporters of the king argued that the monarchy could not survive endless negotiation. Critics accused Charles of using royal authority to settle a deeply personal failure between father and son. Harry watched the coverage with growing discomfort as broadcasters replayed his military service, wedding, departure, and years of public conflict. Meghan remained beside him until one presenter described him as royal history rather than royal future. She reached for the remote and switched off the television. He did not object. The silence that followed felt more final than the commentary. The London Chronicle captured the public mood with a fictional front page carrying the words, "The Last Royal Door," above an image of Windsor's closed gates. Outside the castle, a former soldier placed a small regimental badge beside the barrier as a sign of respect for Harry's past service. Moments later, another visitor picked it up and removed it. Cameras caught the silent exchange, and the image spread faster than any palace statement. Charles faced pressure to defend himself by releasing details from his son's private communications. The king refused. A documented palace briefing recorded his decision to protect Harry from further humiliation, even while standing firmly behind the order. William supported that refusal, knowing public proof might strengthen the crown, but destroy whatever remained of the family. Harry then recorded a short statement. He did not attack Charles. He did not blame William. Instead, he accepted that he would no longer seek restoration, and declared that his future service would continue without royal authority. Harry finished the recording, removed the royal cipher from a folder of personal plans, and replaced it with his own name. The royal cipher was the monarch's official symbol used to show crown authority. His gesture carried none. Public debate had transformed the decision into history, but its true verdict would be written in private, through a father's grief, an heir's burden, and a son finally releasing the life he could no longer reclaim. There was no dramatic reversal, no hidden clause, and no final intervention waiting behind palace walls. Charles's order stood. William did not withdraw his approval. Harry did not launch another campaign to reclaim his position. The struggle that had consumed the family for years ended not with reunion, but with acceptance. One prince remained bound to the crown's future. The other finally stepped beyond its reach, and the king was left to live with the difference between protecting the monarchy and healing his family. Charles allowed the royal restoration closure order to remain untouched. The order was the binding palace decision that permanently blocked Harry from returning as a working royal, holding future military appointments, occupying an official residence, or representing the monarch. The king understood why that mattered. Every earlier compromise had blurred the line between family affection and royal authority, and another temporary arrangement would only restart the same painful struggle. Harry accepted the boundary at last. He told Meghan that he could no longer build his future around the hope that the palace might reverse itself. She listened as he admitted that waiting for restoration had kept him emotionally tied to the institution he had chosen to leave. The younger prince had spent years trying to prove that independence had not erased him, but he now understood that freedom could not begin while he was still asking for permission to return. William carried no sense of victory. The future king knew he had protected the succession, meaning the planned line through which the throne would pass to the next generation. Yet Catherine reminded him that responsibility could justify a decision without removing its human cost. He had secured George's future, but he had also accepted that Harry might never forgive him for the way it was done. Charles then wrote one final letter. A documented account from his private secretary recorded that the message contained no offer, condition, title, or constitutional language. The monarch told his son that the royal door was closed, but the family door would remain open whenever Harry was ready to enter, without demanding that one become the other. Harry read the letter alone. He did not tear it apart. He did not release it publicly. He folded the pages carefully, placed them inside a private drawer, and left them there. Meghan later found him quieter, not defeated, but released from the fight that had shaped so much of his life. Charles closed the leather folder containing the order after the letter was sent. Across the world, Harry closed another drawer over his father's message. Two doors shut, but neither was slammed in anger. The crown survived because uncertainty ended. The family changed because trust did not return. Charles acted as king, William acted as heir, and Harry finally accepted life beyond official royalty. None of them won. Yet all three were freed from a conflict that had trapped them for years. The battle for Harry's restoration ended there, not in triumph or revenge, but in the painful certainty that the monarchy could continue only after everyone stopped pretending the past could still be rebuilt. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.